Hey class, it's Mr. Creighton. So you'll need two things today. So you'll need your sketchbook and your HB pencil. We won't really need the other pencils to shade quite yet. We'll do value next week. So if you look at my sketchbook and look at these objects are what we call geometric, meaning for the most part, they're very basic shapes that are perfectly round or perfectly square. So like circles, ovals, rectangles, squares, things like that. So these objects fit inside of that. But what happens when you have something like this? And you've all drawn this with me in the past. So fruits and veggies, that's what we call organic, meaning they have natural curves to them. So what we'll do is we're just going to do a little warm up. So again, I want you guys to keep warming up. It's important that you're able to kind of get loose before we draw. Some of you guys just draw a few ovals, so just in the corner of your sketchbook. I'm going to draw some small ones. It just kind of gets your fingers and your wrists moving around and just kind of gets your muscles a little bit loose. So what we'll do next is we're just going to draw a little baby pear. So just take your pencil and we're going to draw a little small version of this guy here. So clearly if we look at the pear, the bottom shape is much larger in size comparison to the top. So just draw a little small guy. I'm going to draw a small circle. And then I'm going to curve this up, bring it in, and draw a even smaller cone. And that's just the basics of this object, so without any details. So the reason why we kind of warm up like that is it just helps us fill out the object, it helps us get loose, and now let's do the real thing. So for the real object, of course, obviously, we already observed it. It's clearly taller than it is wide, and we have two curves, one larger at the bottom. So what we'll do in order to keep our object together is you can draw a rectangle and clearly make this rectangle taller than it is wide. All right, and if I look at the way this object is set up, the bottom curve is a little bit taller than halfway, so it takes up a big chunk of this object, so you can create a guideline if you need to. And I'm going to draw a large curve in that space. So I'm just going to go around until I get it round. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Because this object is organic, the curve doesn't need to be perfect, but you do want to make sure it is round. So what we'll do next is I'm going to start on the left side. I'm going to bring this shape in, and it's going to curve in kind of like a hill here, and wrap it back around. I'm just going to go around just to make sure it does connect and that it does flow well together. All right, perfect. So that's our basic shape here. The problem we have right now is this shape is not this shape. So all we want to do is we want to go back in and modify it and make adjustments. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to press harder. I'm not even going to erase. I'm just going to make adjustments here. So the key is that we are now making this pear feel a bit more natural. The curvature is not perfect. There are parts that get flat. There are parts that have bumps. And we just want to represent that. This actually pushes out pretty far here on the right side. So we want to represent that. What you'll also notice is a lot of times objects will flatten out at the bottom. So organic objects will, so they don't roll around all the time. And we want to make that a little bit flatter at the bottom, a little bit rounder on the sides, and represent that. The last thing we want to do is on the top side, we do have a stem. So that stem curves to the right. And then we just bring it back down. And once you have that set, the outside of your object is done. So remember when we draw, we always follow those simple steps. Observe, so observe your shapes. Draw the outside or the larger shape, and we've already done that. And then modify it, of course, to make sure it lines up. And then work your way to the inside details. So what we'll do is if you look at this pear clearly has some details, especially look at the bottom. You can see the bottom of the pear and these lines wrap around on each side, because if your object is curved, of course, any of the lines on the inside will curve too as well. So I'm just going to set up the bottom of this pear. And then all of the lines kind of curve out of there. So the pear itself has these inside details. So remember, inside details are always important. You always got to have them. And the reason why is because it makes it represent the object you are looking at. So what we don't want is just a generic pair. We don't want a pair that's empty on the inside. Every complete sketch we work on, and then especially once we do finish and polish drawings for grades later, we want to make sure that we have a clear outside shape so we know what the object is. And then we want to make sure we have inside detail so that object feels authentic. That is super, super important. And if you look at the pair I'm drawing right now, every line that's on the left curves to the left. Every line that's on the right curves to the right because it is going to follow its shape. So we want to make sure that we represent those things. That's very, very important as you draw. So anytime your object is curved, any lines on the inside will follow that curve. So we want to make sure that we do represent that, again, to make sure that this object feels as authentic as possible. So I'm going to have you guys add that stuff in. Again, I'm going to recommend you do not shade yet because there's some things we want to go over next week in regards to adding value. But you can add more lines, and the more lines you have, the darker those areas will feel. So even if you look at what I'm doing, I'm kind of going over and adding some sketchy lines that's making that bottom part feel darker than what it currently was. I can add a little bit in the stem too as well. And that's all we're going to focus on today. So it's draw an organic object. Again, I'm going to have photographs of objects you can draw in Schoology, and that is your simple assignment for the day. And next week, we'll move on to value. You guys have an awesome day.